last club was there before this one. Traffic would be so bad, they would even park on our side, on Ridgeland.
Exactly. Because I share the alley with Mike, he's on the Richland side, out on Pest.
Yeah, they'll park a few blocks away, I've seen them, and then they'll jump back in someone else's car and get a ride now, it's wild. But yeah, we could, now that it's warmer, we're gonna start knocking on doors in the next week or two.
Yeah.
So I think that could be like one of our focal points, just hitting up those streets.
Gotta be.
And then,
Can you throw speed bumps along
Gotta be.
the parallel to Ridgeland? I'm just waiting for the day somebody kills a kid back there. I'm
Yes.
just waiting.
Where?
speed bumps have been a
In the alley.
conversation for a
Yeah,
long
just
time.
so here's Ridgeland and then the alley on this side and the alley on that side. The
Oh,
alley
you-
on our side,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
every day.
That using that go through,
Flying by.
yeah.
And they're not just going like they're on Ridgeland, they're flying down that alley.
We used to see by us, now I'm in the 1200 block. And
Yeah.
then when Richland backs up going
Yep,
north,
same thing.
they get up to the T alley, everybody turns right and then comes down the alley doing 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Well, these
Flying.
people are not even doing 35. I mean, they go so fast I can barely see them
I
go
know,
by.
I know that, it's, you know, somebody's gonna get killed.
You guys are live.
Okay.
It's live, okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Jim.
Want this open or close?
We can close it. Thank you. We were waiting for Mary still.
And Claudia's coming.
Claudia, yeah.
And Marge is in there later.
Yeah, that's true.
We gotta ask them for some napkins and a knife for
Yeah.
those couple kids.
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah. Thank you.
You can only stay till 12, Rob, is that fine?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we could,
Wrap up?
do this in an hour or so.
Perfect.
Just because we want to respect people during the day.
Yeah, well, I don't imagine Mary has more than that.
And I built in some time, afterwards, so if we want to chat afterwards, I'd like to have a little bit for like 10 minutes after we talk to.
Well, I gotta watch the time today too.
Everyone, good morning, how are you?
Probably give you a call.
Pass these out to you guys, and then I'll hand over the rest.
Hey,
Oh,
Carol,
awesome.
what's going on?
How are you?
How are
It's
you,
good
girl?
to see you. I'm gonna give these the
Hi,
rest
Mary.
to you. Hey, how are you?
All right, what's going on?
Thank you.
You could have made
One
it
for me,
smaller.
one for Mary.
Wasn't
The
me.
rest for you.
Okay, let's see if I can read it.
You need it further away, I need it closer.
I don't need it. Give me the glasses. There we go, there we go.
All right, I'm gonna close the door just because it's a little noisy. Good morning. Good, how are you?
Good.
There you go.
All right. So we are missing a few people, but I'd like to get started and we can call them out and then just so that folks know that they've entered the meeting. So at 11:02, I'd just like to call this meeting to order. Just open it up first, before we get started with any new business and the conversation we're gonna have today with the building department. To any public comment, if anybody would like to make a public comment, this would be the time.
We only have 30 minutes.
Time is
Good
precious.
morning.
Mark?
Well, can I bring up about the abandoned properties? You've got one on Richland, you've got one on Kyler. I've got the one at 1239. We're having rat issues, they're finding in his garage, they're finding underneath his back porch, plus the fact that the property, according to the last police officer that was in there, has like over 10 dumpsters full of garbage inside the house. When they walked through, he said there was garbage past his waist, that they were actually walking on top of the garbage to make sure that the resident wasn't in there when we asked for a wellness check.
Okay.
And I'm worried about this, we're getting into the warmer weather now, the house is all sealed up. Does anybody have this on their radar? Because the last time I talked to somebody in Berwyn Village Hall, I made a comment to them, I said, would you wanna have this as your house next door to you? And they told me, but I don't.
What's the property address?
1239
How long has that place been?
1239 what, I'm sorry.
Ridgeland.
Ridgeland?
It's
And do you
been
know
vacant
who-
since December 6th.
And do you know who
Since
you
the
were,
village evicted them.
So the comment that was made to you, do you know who you were speaking with?
I wanna say it was Shar or Cher or somebody like that.
I don't have a Shar or a Share, okay.
So she claimed she was the caseworker for this.
Case, we don't specifically have like a case worker. We
Well,
do
that's
have,
who they handed me off to.
yeah, we do have a blight officer for that area, but it's not a woman.
It
It's-
wasn't a
it's
blight
man.
officer, it was somebody in the building. So, I
Okay,
have
I'll check
no
it out
idea.
for you.
And the thing also too, it's like, with the garbage and the rodents and stuff, the biggest issue seems to be you guys work to a certain point, certain time. Okay, in the evenings and the mornings is when people overstuff their garbage cans. All right? We can't always get out there at 6 AM to take pictures of this stuff, but there's people, they have multiple families in, they only have one garbage can because they don't wanna spend the money for extra garbage cans. And that's part of the rodent problem. I mean, I've been out there, what was it, a few weeks ago, when I was watching my brother's dog, and I'm watching the rats running in the alley, you know? And I left a message for Awesome Pest Services, and he came out and debated for him, but, you know, when they're out running in the alley at night, what are you gonna do? I mean, the cans are stuffed beyond belief, they're open. You know, and the same with the dumpsters on the next block. People, they just take them and they throw their bags on top of the dumpsters. They don't even care to throw them in.
We do prefer you to call the city, and yeah, because the reason why is because we have a tracking system for us in pest control. And then this way, we know exactly what he's doing for the area and how often he's there. And if it's a problematic area, we try to do different things. But if you're calling Awesome yourself, that kind of, we don't know what's going on.
Well, with the garbage, it's almost like you guys need to have somebody either come in later and work later and go in the evenings or go early mornings and catch these people, because these people, I mean, it's just gotten ridiculous sometimes with the way they stuff the garbage cans. I mean, the lids are open 3 feet tall and the stuff's spilling out into the alley.
So are you speaking the 1200 block of Ridgeland in the alley? Because this is a vacant home, so it wouldn't have the garbage in the alley.
No, he
or
hasn't had
shouldn't.
the garbage in the alley and the garbage cans probably 25 years.
Okay, so the 1200 block of Ridgeland in the alley, correct?
Yeah.
All right, I'll have the blight officer put that on their radar and go there a little bit more often. I mean, if they're putting garbage out there and nobody's picking it up, they're still gonna catch it, whether they go in the morning or they go at night, because it's still gonna be there until garbage day, or we give them a
Well, they do
citation
it
and
the
it
night
gets
of
picked up.
garbage gets put out, and so the next morning it gets picked up.
All right, well,
So,
if it's getting picked up, I would say that whatever they're putting out should be allowed by Waste Management, otherwise it wouldn't get picked up. You could put garbage out, non-food items, 24 hours before your garbage
but, you
pickup.
know, the garbage is getting jumped on by the rats and everything, the bags are getting picked open, I mean,
Well, we haven't changed that,
they've
the
overstuffed
24-hour
the cans.
law.
I mean, people actually need to get more garbage cans, but now that you have to pay for them, people don't wanna do them. Plus, you also run into the fact that some people are afraid to get more than one cans because they have they have multiple families living there, and they're afraid this is gonna let the city know they have multiple families living there.
No, I've never heard of that. From what I understand, I mean, some people have more children than others, and they do need more cans. All they have to do is call Waste Management. They do have to pay for the can,
Right.
but they don't pay any extra for the pickup.
Right,
And it's not a red flag to any of us.
well, some people don't feel like that, so.
In some cases too, if it's a two flat, so they may have, maybe they could have 3 cans,
Yeah.
and they only have 2, so that's something we could, go through there and see if they have ample cans for like a 2 flat.
And
So residential's, you get 1 and 1, you have to purchase another one.
Right.
But 2 flats, they do get, I believe, 2 and 1, so they get 3 altogether, and maybe they don't have enough on those.
if it's okay with Rob, maybe what we could do, if that's information that we're taking on, we're putting out throughout the public comment, so we're noting down notes. But perhaps we could also, Rob, go into the pest control reporting, and functions, because I do believe that this is, give a lot of more insights on what, can be the steps to ensure that we're documenting. Because it sounds like you've done your due diligence in reporting it, but we just wanna ensure, and that's the purpose too of Mary being here, that we document it so that we can effectively map it. Is that okay?
Yeah,
We
and
can
I,
go into that?
yeah,
Okay.
we can go into that, and also just wanna say as well, we are gonna be out more often now that it's warming up, and so I'd be happy to walk that block with you and talk to residents about their cans as well, because I've been talking to people about fixing their cans or replacing them or getting a new can, just because, last year when we were doing the alley cleanups, we saw that at the alleys as well. We see
Right.
one house with just one can, or like a two flat, with just one can, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, this needs, we need to talk to somebody here, so we can also knock on doors, bring some of the waste management handouts as well, with information on how they can order them, and talk to residents as well on that block, since it's been something that's reoccurring. And then, Mary has taken down the information as well, so now a blight officer can check out that area and see, what's happening, check out the patterns and be able to, also do their role within it too, which we can talk about when we talk about the process. But I appreciate you bringing that up, because it is, once again, as we've been talking about in this committee for a long time, it's like a multi-layered issue. There's so many
Right.
different ways that this can end up, getting worse, right, or the issue can kind of exacerbate, and so we wanna make sure that we're looking at all the different aspects of this, whether it's waste management, garbage, the pest control side of it, right, the ways in which we're working with residents and educating them on the issues, and how we're bringing people into the work from all the different stakeholder groups. So, once again, it's a very welcome reminder that, like, we have work to do, and that we can build on what we already have established, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, my biggest issue though right now is that house next to me.
Right.
And, something needs to be done with that, because with the summer months coming and the heat and everything, this house is corked up like a bottle. And he's got garbage supposedly, according to the police, from top to bottom in this thing.
Is there anything as a city that we can do to, address that or check in on it formally, just to?
Yeah, I'm texting Helen to see what the situation is. Sometimes when a house is vacant, there's different, we definitely cannot go on vacant property, in the garage, anywhere.
Right.
But I'm texting Helen right now to see what the situation is. Did a flipper take it and they just haven't done anything yet, or those are just the things that we check out.
Okay.
And then as a general procedure, the building department works with, administration to identify vacant areas, or what we call potential blight areas, and they are serviced to an extent in terms of, light exterior maintenance when possible by our public works and others, so
Well, this thing's
there is a
been-
list.
So the one thing too is, some of these houses might be held up in trust or any of that. Bank might have taken it over. I have one in my ward it's been about 3 years, and it's, it took a while for the bank to take it over, and they're still kind of, still working on it. So it's a problem, but the cities went out there and secured some of the property when the fence is falling down and things like that, but yeah, when it comes to getting in that house or really getting in that yard, we really can't do much about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
so it is on the radars, and it is part of the protocol to not necessarily maintain them, but to ensure that there's safety procedures, like fences or anything that may cause somebody to get injured. But it's still, in many cases, a private property, and while we may feel that we have the right because of the blight, there is certain limitations.
Yeah, and it depends on what status it's in. Like, if the bank has not come forward yet, and there's nobody living there, and it's vacant, I can have someone go clean up the yard.
Well,
I can have
Berwyn's
someone
been
do-
cleaning the grass.
Okay, the grass, and
I
I can
just
have
wonder if
somebody
they're gonna
remove.
continue this year
Yes.
with that.
Oh, sure.
Mhm.
Definitely, but like, we can't go in the garage, we can't go into the house.
Correct, there is.
Marcia, do you have some?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I had
Bad
great
luck, though.
success with a property in the third ward the city has a dangerous building ordinance. And so I put something on city council to declare this as a dangerous building, and that gives the opportunity for the city to knock it down. And once we passed that, I even sent to the landowners that I could find on county records, sent them a copy of my communication saying that I was gonna have the property declared dangerous, and they took care of it. Because they didn't wanna, it's valuable, so
Right.
I did that with 2 houses, one on Riverside Drive and another one on, I think it was Home Avenue near the CN tracks.
So in terms of steps, like, and you all can look into it and kind of see, are you all able to see like who owns it, or if it's in, yeah, the bank owns it now? So then if you all can communicate with me to see where we're at with that, and if anybody responds to like, issues, like that you're telling them, hey, there's issues in this house, can you guys take care of it? If they're not responding to it, then maybe we can elevate it to that level afterwards. So now we have steps that we could take, for sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank
And
you.
Mary, right directly behind 1239, kind of kitty corner, is 1236 Kyler. That's that garage that's been falling down.
That you've
for
been,
years.
yes, except, you know what, we, in fact, Eric, and I know you know who Eric is, the blight officer in the area,
Mhm.
he just spoke to the daughter. So,
Okay.
the people who live there that, where the house burned down, they are alive, the parents are alive, they still are owners of the property, so Eric's working with her right now to get the, I guess there's a car in that garage.
Yeah,
So he's working with her right now to get that car out of the garage so that we can go forward.
okay, the parents died. They're.
He just told me they're alive,
Oh,
and
maybe
he's,
the-
and he's speaking to the daughter.
Pellegrino's been dead
Ralph
for
and
20
his
years.
wife
Been dead
died
for
years
20
ago. Yeah.
He's gone.
Well, maybe it was just like a, miscommunication about like who's.
Well, who
they're
knows who
talking to.
the
Yeah.
homeowner was that, you know what I mean? If it was, if
Last
they
name was
passed away, it
Pellegrino.
may have passed away, no, but what I'm
Mhm.
saying is, he may, will-wise, it may have went to another name, and then we don't know
Oh,
because
I
it
know,
hasn't,
yeah.
you know, so maybe that's who she's speaking of.
But the original owner's gone. He's dead.
Okay.
Him and his wife both.
Both, yeah.
But that's good to know that that's in the works, right? So they're gonna be working to get that car out, and then the idea is.
Yeah, that's what she's working to get the title, I
Okay.
guess.
Now, then question if, once the car is gone, then what happens to the structure? Because that's
Again,
gonna fall
again, like
over.
we spoke before a long time ago, that's all in Chuck's hands after
Yeah.
that.
Okay, after they get the
Correct.
vehicle out.
So once again, we're at 11:16, I wanna make sure we can get out at 12 and also be able to ask, our building department, some questions. So I thank you, everybody, for public comment. I am gonna be calling Mary Beth, she just actually, asked if she can call in, so I'm calling her right now. And while I'm doing that, if everybody can just kinda go around and just introduce yourself so we have it on the record of who's here. Start with Scott.
Alderman Lennon?
Hi, I'm Marge Paul, city clerk and also a member of the Berwyn Health District.
Mike Maskowski, resident of Berwyn on Ridgeland Avenue.
Mary Gadini, I work for the Blight Division in the Building Department.
Claudia Yala, City Communications, with Office of the Mayor.
Keith Hardecker, 21-year resident here, 1810 Kyler.
Don Miller, Fifth Ward resident, 1200 block of Kyler.
Rob Pavone, 5th Ward Alderman, and also have Mary Beth on the line. Can you introduce yourself?
Mary Beth Overnella, 7th Ward Alderman.
Awesome. So, thank you all for coming here today. Thank you for coming and sharing your public comment as well with us, and for everybody collaborating and brainstorming around that issue. That was really, really helpful for all of us to learn the different ways that we can approach these issues. We are going to get into two things today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening around rat a mitigation plan, the communication process, the reporting process. We're gonna hear that from the Blight Division. And then we're potentially gonna get some updates, I don't know, around the Health District and what they're doing around their rat mitigation plan, so that we can start moving towards next steps around recommendations. We've been meeting and talking to a lot of different stakeholders who are involved in this work for the past several months, and I think we're at the point now that we've been in front of everybody, asked a lot of questions and learned a lot from folks who are involved in this work, to be able to provide some real comprehensive, detailed recommendations as to how we feel the city should move forward and how we can support the city in moving forward with this work. So just want to thank everybody for their work on that thus far, and really excited to get to that process of now making recommendations. I'm going to turn it over to Mary and Claudia to kind of walk us through a little bit of the pest control reporting and functions, and talk a little bit about the data they've been getting. I want to make sure that we get through this with enough time to hear updates as well from the Health District. So if we could spend around 15 to 20 minutes on this, and folks, if you can ask your questions and try to be succinct, that would be great, just so that we make sure that it can get everybody back to work and back to their daily schedule.
Just before you start, there's coffee cake over there. that I
Oh, yeah,
brought.
please.
I
So
brought
much.
specifically for you all. Make sure you get
Get our
some.
sugar.
We are absolutely
Does
plying you with sweets.
Thank you so much.
Please
Does
go ahead.
everybody have this in front of them?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, Marge, you as well. Okay.
This is beautiful, by the way.
Well, I want to thank Mary Gazzini and Chuck Lazaro for working with us. This has always been something that has been in place, but up until just a few months ago, we decided to make sure that we document it and create it into a flow chart. Now, some of this information, this document, I want to, be transparent, is an internal document, but because Rob, wants to make sure that the committee is well versed in what the functions are. We are obviously making it public, but it is very involved. So there may be things in here that not necessarily is public, but is what is happening in the back end. So I'll have Mary start with the first part of the most important thing for rodent abatement, which is the reporting process. Because right now, many of you guys have been here 20, 25 years. You may have relationships, or you may know people in different departments. You may be accustomed to reporting things in a certain way. And we just want to take it back to the way that the reporting should be done in order to create metrics. If the reporting is not facilitated in this manner, then we have kind of like the same situations where it's kind of hearsay and everybody's giving you different, I heard from the PD, I heard from the building. If it's not in this format, then it's not valid. So you can go ahead and start, Mary.
Well, first I want to say everyone knows that phone calls were always the way to report. Claudia has made it very easy to report online now. Those reports come to us daily. When I get those, I make sure that I give that person a call, let them know if they put their number down. They don't always do, or it's a fictitious number. But I try to call them and let them know that we did receive the report and try to get whatever information that I need for Joe. We try to give Joe as much information as we can. Even though we do not go on private property, if they're running through the yard or whatever, he may want to go take a look to see if there's any burrows, so we want to make sure we get phone numbers. He cannot go on private property without their okay. So we try to get as much information as we can. Once it's done, do you want to follow through with the rest of the
I just wanted to show really quickly, and we can also at a later time put it in a bigger screen, but here is our very dated website, which will be getting a makeover, so try not to put too much into the website itself, but we are going to keep this How Do I quick widget. This How Do I has many different links, and you'll see that it says Report Rat Issues. When you click on it, it'll take you to this, which is what we define as the online form stack. And this online intake is very thorough and specific. This is something that we've also done digitally, where if you've ever seen those QR codes, we've made it easy for you to report it. And additionally, something that took place this summer is we started to put rodent abatement signage in the alleys. And the alleys have poison control information. I'll get a copy of it so you guys can see it. And it also has a quick QR code so that when you are looking at the alley and you notice that there is an issue, you can immediately use your phone camera to get to this, and it documents it. And it's extremely important for this to be documented either via phone. And I just want to also note that Mary is the only person in the entire building that takes in this information. So if there's 60, 100, 80, whatever number of reports that come online, if there's any missing information, if people didn't put the full address, if people didn't, Mary follows up individually and manually retrieves that information to input in the case.
Okay. Yes, so once we do get a report of an area, when we put it into the system, it also goes to several people. It always went to the health department. The health department's role at that time was to check to see if there were any restaurants in the area that were causing the problem or whatever. That wasn't working for us. So I added the blight officer in the area, because what would happen is Joe would go out and he would say, hey, you know, this guy's for feeding the birds, and this guy's, you know, he's got junk in his yard, or someone has garbage, and by the time the blight officer would get out there, it would be gone. So now we alert them both at the same time, so they're both going out to the area, you know, to tag team it. It still goes to the health department. I'm not quite sure what they do with them, or.
Yeah, I'm not
you
sure
know,
either.
I really don't know. As far as, trying to get control, especially COVID times and post-COVID and now, we have Josie in our department who actually goes out and does the work that the health department was supposed to do. So she'll go out, she'll check the restaurant, she makes sure that they have proper documentation and current documentation for pest control. If there's any debris or anything like that, she talks to them, she tries to, you know, you don't wanna run business out of town, so, you know, you wanna talk to them first, see if they can, you know, fix it, do what they need to do. If so, that's great. If not, then they get ticketed.
And then the over the phone case assessment, which we already kind of went over.
Correct.
You'll see that number 3, that's everything that is included in a report. And as you will note, the reasoning behind sending out the city designated area blight inspector, in addition to the city commercial pest control inspector, that we identified as Josie, our employee. So that's 2 inspectors that simultaneously, in addition to the contractor, come out, and a lot of the times it's to assess additional blight factors such as garbage, accumulations, overgrown weeds and growth. That's probably the biggest factor. And so we understand that when there is a rodent reporting, that it's not just the rodent in itself causing the issue. There's holistic environmental factors that are happening here. That's why now we have those 2 designated inspectors come out, but it is important to note that these inspectors check for blight and mitigating factors. They are not rodent contractors. They do not have knowledge in abatement in itself. They have knowledge based on their training on what may aggravate or add to this, but they cannot speak on the practices or even the recommendations. That's where the contractor, Awesome Pest, comes in. All these 3 people simultaneously receive the report, all 3 within 24 to 48 hours, depending on when it's reported, go out, assess, report, document, and using the same metric and report system, give a full report to Mary, who then sees it and with Joe can come up with a mitigation plan. But again, none of the employees that we have a background or training in actual rodent abatement, just on blight in itself and the mitigation practices surrounding the environmental factors of that. And so then we go on to the pest control metric.
Yeah, so once phone calls are received in that, there is a system, I think Robert, I gave you some copies of that. We do have a tracking map, so every area shows how many calls come in. So then that way we can see what areas are problematic, so that Joe will go there, maybe he has to use a different method. You know, I know Claudia, which is out of her duties, her and Melissa will go out and campaign the area for us.
Yeah.
You know, so we've been getting a lot of help out of our department for this. And mainly because of the fact of COVID, because COVID was the thing that caused even more problems than what we had to begin with. So the tracking method, the actual map shows you the areas, and then once Joe sends me an email of his action, that also gets put into the system, so that this way I know that he actually went out. Anything to add?
And then the only thing that you added is the ongoing blight literacy campaign. That is another additional component that the mayor really wanted the city communications division to focus on. When we did thorough research, we contacted all the villages, so that's Oak Park, Cicero, Lyons, every village that surrounds us, to find out what their practices were. Most, if not all of them, have this program out of their respective health districts or health departments. And yes, they collaborate with the building department in almost the exact same function. The only difference is there's a designated person to oversee, like you said, from morning to night, a full 8-hour shift. And basically maintain and oversee the contractor in itself, tracking and working with, you know, their respective building departments for the pest control metric. But no building department really takes this on, because even though it is in the purview in consideration of blight environment, rodent abatement in itself is a very specific practice, and it requires knowledge that we don't have the training for or the staff at this moment. So the online blight literacy campaign, I work with IDHS and the state, and they recommended to have this ongoing. That's why we started doing the QR codes. Something recently Mary just launched is about the recycling. Recycling a lot of the times is used as an additional garbage can, unfortunately. That causes other issues. And so every time that we're faced with one of these issues in communication, we develop other manners. I'm gonna go grab one of the door hangers that we just created so that we can continue to educate. We don't wanna assume people know about things like that as logic as it might be to you. Oh, there's overflow garbage is gonna cause rats. We don't wanna assume that folks you know, may or may not understand that, so we want to educate and be proactive, and we've been, you know, doing everything we can, even if it seems that something that's like common sense, we don't want to assume, and so we're taking all the steps necessary. All the information is in Spanish and English, as we have streamlined our communications to reflect the population, so everything's bilingual. That's it.
I've got some questions from the cooperation of the health district
Yes.
aspect. Mary, later on, if you could let me know who you send those emails to, I'd be happy to follow up and make sure that
Yeah,
they're
I don't-
tracking.
Yeah, I don't believe the email has been changed since 2005 when Wayne created it. It's inspector or something. It doesn't have a specific name.
Okay, something.
So I'll get the information for you.
Right. And just as a follow-up before we, you know, maybe as a segue into the health district aspect of today's meeting, the health district in November passed this program, food establishment rodent prevention, and this was an inter-office agreement. David Avila is the supervisor of Berwyn Township and also the health district president. And he submitted this to us that we passed in November. And this was supposed to be a cooperative effort between the health district and the building department with regard to this. And we haven't gotten, the board members haven't gotten any feedback yet. We're supposed to be also tracking and making stuff. We're supposed to be submitting folders to the food establishments and the restaurants. And that is what Josie, I believe, was supposed to be reviewing to make sure.
Talking about the packet?
Was that agreed upon?
No, so the packet that was presented by the health district at a meeting, I can't recall
One
exactly.
of our first meetings.
Right, unfortunately, that was never presented to the
Well,
mayor.
this was something that David said was agreed upon between he and Chuck Lazara.
Well,
I'll give you a
understand that,
copy.
but- Yeah,
And
I have
I'll
a
tell you
copy.
what, this is what the health district, what Jackie Pareda and I believe it was put into place and was functioning. And so I'm really very pleased to be able to have this discussion because we don't know whether or not it was implemented or what the status was. So
It is
let
not
me-
implemented.
all right, well, good.
Mhm.
So I will.
And I just have
I
one
will be
question
happy to
on,
do your follow-up.
well, and I just have one
Anything-
question with that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little confused. Why isn't the health department doing that? Why do they need someone from the building department to take that on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have a staff of 6, and they right now have been doing COVID vaccinations and testing, and we don't really have anybody else that
You
we
have
had
two more than
one,
we do.
we had one, we do vaccinations and testing for COVID. We had one part-time person who did, licensing inspections for daycares and would go out to restaurants, and then we have a part-time person who is actually has the, inspection licensing, criteria that is required in order to, you know, mark that up. So, the problem was prior, the last administration, prior to the last election, we had a supervisor who was, dug in and, in my opinion, lacked a lot of, creativity and energy to put toward any kind of health district or township problems. So that's the answer to your question. That's why we're not doing it. It's because for 40 years, they did little more than pass out Band-Aids at health fairs. So, but now we have a supervisor and a health district president who has ideas, but sometimes they are passed on to the board as something that is already implemented. So what I'm giving you is a copy, and I believe I already passed this on to the members of this committee in November, when we last met, but these are the minutes, the approved minutes of what occurred when this, program was, established by the health district. And it has all of this information, and, it was my understanding that information would be passed back to the health district, and we would be doing, you know, data and stuff, but we haven't, since November, haven't had, and maybe because of the holidays or whatever, this was supposed to begin in December, even though it says it's gonna roll out in February. That was an error. And so I just wanna know how I can help the blight department in my capacity as a board member only. I'm not the office manager over there, I'm not the chief, you know, officer, but I can certainly try to, put information on the health district.
Marge, one of our biggest revisions after the fact that this was presented to the mayor was that currently there is no, or you can let me know if there is, tracking metric that you guys have in place. I know that from the last conversation, we asked David to either connect with our IT or Wayne, who develops that system, because as you can see from this packet, what Josie, the city commercial pest control inspector, was being asked to fill would be in a paper copy, and I wasn't sure how that paper copy would then be, like, how would that be recorded on your end? So we're trying to, you know, create these methods of feasibility of reporting, so we do have to have a metric system to even report that to you as a health district, and right now we don't. So in my opinion, Josie would be gathering paper copies, scanning them, inputting I don't know how in your system, and then I don't know how we would get them back.
So we had originally talked in the last, in the previous Rat Abatement Committee, is to try to have, because we have an intergovernmental agreement, to have a system that the health district can go in and, you know, put their information in if they go to a property, a restaurant, or whatever, and then the building department would have access to the same system, or it would piggyback on our system in the city, and all that information is in there when they have their health inspection, if it's a commercial business or a building. And all of that would be at, you know, we could just go in, say Mary could go in there and see all that information. Same with the health district, if they get a call about something, they could go on there and say, well, there was blight there was this, and they could see that. So we talked about that before, and I think that would be something that we should really kind of improve and try to get going moving forward. When this was presented, I know at that time Chuck was not aware of this.
Okay,
So, and this is why I think what needs to happen now is building department, maybe mayor's office, blight, and health district or township all sit around the table to go through this and kind of define the lines of where we can where we can kind of work together
Right.
on the common goal.
And I think that that's one of my concerns as a health district board member, is that the health district is creating their own series of policies, the city is creating their own, and there is either a lack of understanding or cooperative effort between both, because, you know, we are getting, and here's another thing that we just passed, and I hope that you're aware of, but we, after a couple weeks of effort putting this together, we finally had our lawyer draw this up. David is going out for requests for proposals for rat abatement companies. And he had a vision perhaps of splitting the city in half, and that we would hire our own rat abatement company and do like from Harlem to, you know, halfway point, Oak Park, and then, you know, the city take care of Oak Park to Lombard. And so I wanted to make sure that we finally, the thing is that we have nobody that has an expertise on rat abatement
Sure.
at the health district, and we don't even know what's involved with it. I mean, I don't know whether they've ever had, whether David or anybody who put this together had any conversations with, you know, Joe, Awesome Pest, to see what is involved in a, and so this to me is almost like a fact-finding proposal, because it seems a little bit premature, but I'll pass it out. That's just my own personal opinion about what the health district passed, but it was one of those things where, okay, why don't you go ahead and pass this?
And can I jump in really quick, Mark?
Yeah.
Could you all share a little bit about what you found when you were looking into other contractors as well? I think
Yes.
there's something that I learned from you in the last conversation, that there is, there might be this perception, right, that we can go to another contractor, we can go to like a big rat abatement or, you know, pest control company, but that what happens here in Berwyn is pretty unique. So I don't know if you can share a little
Yeah.
bit about that, because I think it relates to what maybe is trying to be happening on this side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's unique. Every municipality has, you know, a pest control. Most of them do it themselves.
But that's the part that I'm
Correct.
getting at.
We don't have the money to do it ourselves.
Right.
And I don't mean the blight people or whatever. It is it's a division all
It's
of
a
its
city
own.
department.
Of course, we don't have money for that. When you do talk to other companies, I know Claudia had the experience, I had the experience in one of the meetings when we were trying to hire someone to take half of the city, because a long time ago, that was our idea, to see if the difference between Joe's end and, you know, maybe somebody new, somebody fresh, maybe someone with some different ideas. Most pest control companies do buildings, they don't do alleys. One. Two, because of the fact that Joe has been here for many, many years, a lot of them don't wanna take the liability of what he's already put down. They would work completely different than Joe. Joe does go into, you know, a yard just to see which way they're going. Other pest companies are not going to do that, they just do alleys.
Right.
They're gonna stay on public property.
And I think that's what I was kind of pointing to in terms of the uniqueness of the situation that we have right now. Where, if I'm understanding this right, this is going out to try to find maybe another company to do that on a different side of town. But really, that from your research, you haven't seen folks that would be willing to do that because they're not set up for that. Like that's not what they typically do.
But we want more of the hands-on where Joe will get permission to go on to private property so he can find the burrows and eradicate them.
You know, he's not paid to go on private property, and nor would, nor would a company that would come in, because it would cost you,
Liability.
it would cost a ton of money. You know,
Right.
Joe does that because he tells me that he lives in Berwyn, and it helps him to, if he sees burrows, which direction they're going in, and
Of course.
all of that good stuff.
Because the burrows usually aren't in the alley, they're on private property. And running.
No,
in the
there are
alley-
there's several
there's
burrows.
some, there's some.
No, there's
Some.
several. There's a ton of burrows in the alley.
Right, there are some.
Just because you have a burrow in your yard doesn't mean that it was the one that
Right.
they went in. It might have been the one
Right.
they came out of.
Right, exactly, exactly.
So this RFP is the one that Claudia, is this the one that you guys put together? The city
This
side?
is, originally what we had requested was to have an RFQ, and the purpose for that is because during our research and in what we discovered in the uniqueness of each municipality, is that the RFP, what we were advised is that instead of us saying this is what we need, to have somebody that has the expertise to say, this is what is feasible, and this is how much it costs. Because if we do it the other way around, we only got 30K for you, we're gonna get what you paid for. So instead of working it backward, like you said, we wanted to know, like you said, yeah, there is an expertise, because we just agreed that absolutely no one in the city or the health department has this knowledge. So how
You're talking
can
about
we?
bringing in like a consultant,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And
Something
essentially, it's not even always a consultant, a company. There's several big companies now that absolutely, they have high liability things where they're not going to go, they're not gonna personalize it per se. But there are many companies that this is part of their process. They do tell you what the different options are, the cost options, what kind of baits versus another. I heard that there was like environmentally friendly, all those things. Not everybody specializes in that. So then you have to have these several contractors kind of provide for you what their specialty and their abatement practices are. But I do agree with Marge that I do believe that all of this is very premature, because the fact is that there's absolutely no reporting infrastructure in place for us to collaboratively share data right now with the health district. So I just want to make sure that that is something that we understand. There is no reporting metric in place to effectively communicate with the health district at this moment. So anything that we may dream of, we still don't have the infrastructure to actually execute it.
And so my question, I guess, is if you were looking at it from your vantage point of the work that you're doing, right, and you all are becoming and have been like expert, I guess, in the process, right, of reporting and cracking the data, but there's a next step, like there's obviously, you know, residents and folks, and even you all that see that there needs to be more done. What is the ideal next step? Like, would it be bringing in a consultant to be able to you know, give that advice, give that expert voice, and explain, you know, what are the options, and go through the data and look at the data we already have and see it?
Yes.
Or do you feel like this kind of like, let's test this group against this group is the most effective way to go? Because like I'm starting to have like thoughts on that, right? Of like, how are we wasting a whole year getting someone to come and do the west side, and then someone keep the east side, and then let's compete, and then let's figure out who did better, and then we still need to bring a consultant in anyway to tell us what to do with this.
Correct, and the consultant, they definitely will look at our program, but they actually write a program
Right,
in
they
the
build one,
city
right?
that, you know, Joe can follow.
So the consultant would work with Joe, obviously, kind of, sort of. He's
With
kind
the
of like.
infrastructure in place.
He doesn't do the work.
Right, with
See,
the infrastructure in place.
And that's why I feel that this meeting is very valuable, because this request for proposal doesn't ask for a consultant. The information that we received as a board was poorly drafted in the first request for qualifications. We didn't even know why we would ask somebody for qualifications if you weren't gonna, what are you gonna use those qualifications for? Who are you gonna report those to? And we couldn't get answers back. So the document got sent to our attorney, who then drafted a request for proposal, which we were told then that, you know, we would see what we get and then maybe.
Well,
I
it's
think-
the same thing with the qualifications, because what the qualifications it actually does is it tells you what's feasible,
Yeah,
instead of, you know, what we want,
Right, and
is what actually can occur.
the communication between the city and the health district, something gets lost in the translation when it finally gets put onto our agenda, right? Because I think it would be a brilliant idea to have a consultant come in, tell us you know.
Well, I'll tell you what the confusion was, okay? Once we went into pre-COVID and COVID and developed more problems, that was kind of our solution because of the fact of money. We have no money for a consultant. We have no money for someone to take over for Joe, because you're talking for what he gets paid.
Right?
I have people in the business that reached out to a couple companies if they would be interested. They kind of mapped it out and said they wouldn't even touch it for under $300,000 a month. So, I mean, a year. So, our problem is money. So if we came up with the half and half, let the health department take on half of the city, pay for half of it, we're doing half, maybe we could put more money into Joe on our half, and then you need to do what you need to do on your half. But really, when I spoke with the person that I know, every municipality, whether they do it themselves or not, they still have a consultant that writes the program to begin with, and making sure that it's being followed.
I mean, it could.
It's not a full-time job, from what I understand, you know, it's
It
not.
could be included in the proposal. The proposal does stipulate, I can see here, if you guys look at page 18, which is, you know, the meat of the document, attachment A, that's what you're asking this contractor for. It does ask them for those metrics. So there is always a possibility that an RFP will be received with somebody already having an infrastructure plan in place, and then we don't have to, because essentially that's another barrier for our communication, the sharing of the data. Like you said, we know that it goes to Inspector at, have no idea how those reports are populated, even to feasibly do what was presented by the town, we can't do it, we don't have the reporting infrastructure for it. So I do think that the RFP is a good first step, because at least we can potentially obtain that. But I agree also with Rob that it might all be us chasing our tail, when essentially none of us, as we know, are rodent abatement experts, and we really do need somebody with that expertise. Knowing that we have 63,000 people living here, we need that. We need somebody with that knowledge on, you know, the density, the population. Another unique factor to Berwyn, as you guys know from the density of it and the size of it, is that other municipalities have very separated commerce and residential areas, and they have fields. And so all these things do play a role in rodent mitigation, and we don't have any of those. We don't have any, you know, our residential is right next to our commercial. Sometimes it's mixed use, you know, that's standard for rodent activity. We don't have fields other than, you know, Morton West, we don't have a lot of space. That is also something that in other municipalities, they don't deal with that, because their the way that they're set up, their zoning is so vast and moves around, you know. So we have all these unique issues to Berwyn, and so it is very, because we have a unique issue to Berwyn, it is very critical to have an expert assess it, and then give us advice on how to move forward, instead of us coming up with ideas based on our experiences, but we're not rodent, you know, abatement contractors.
Hey, Rob, we got like 8 minutes and I gotta go at noon.
Yeah.
So I have a couple, can I ask
Yeah,
a couple
please, ask
questions?
some questions, yeah.
So how much does that person cost, the consultant, to bring them in and figure out a plan?
We don't know.
We don't know. We got-
But maybe we'll find out if
We'll
we get
find out
answers from the
with the
RFP.
RFP.
Now that I know what the health district was asking for, what is the RFP for?
Yes.
So,
So we-
so how long does that process take?
We don't know, I can't even tell you if we have published this RFP and sent it out to any con.
I don't think so,
I've
because
asked for
usually it
them
would be
to-
right here.
It'd be a
Yeah.
name and a date, yeah.
Because
I have
the,
someone that does write for the city of Chicago and for other municipalities. I mean, I can reach out to him and ask, money-wise, what he thinks it would cost.
Because, first of all, this is all fabulous. How does this get to people in the neighborhoods?
So, it's on our social media platforms, we
Yeah.
give that information to the aldermen, and then we also, if you see this one here, and it's
Lo-
very small,
You see
this
it?
one is the same thing.
Same QR code?
And then this is something we just recently developed, which is again to notify people, give them like a last chance, before they're ticketed. And then also, once, Mary creates the, report and we have the metric. And again, it's not really, this is what somebody in that division would do. Our communications division goes out to that block, let's say the 1200 block of Richland, and we flyer with that to every single house.
'Cause we-
Was it last year or year before that we did it in the water department?
Oh, and then we
The
also
water
send it
bill,
in the
yeah,
water.
so that was the other thing that I was asking, so this is great. I think this, oops, I'm so sorry, in like a little,
The notes.
I know, I have to report back, there's that one too. Something like this going in the water, I think like a miniature version of this
Okay, maybe last 6.
would, well, you said it was internal, and I
Yes.
understand why, but if this could be even shorter for,
Okay.
you know,
A resident friendly.
rat abatement for dummies, okay, and I'm referring to myself. So something that's super simple, that's easy for
Don't
folks
we have,
to get their hands on,
yeah.
just because
I mean,
so,
that's why you created that thing on the computer also though, right?
Yes.
So that they would know what steps to follow for reporting.
Yes.
exactly, so that's the other thing too, that, so this is all beautiful information, it's really helpful, because we've done a lot of research on what other places do, and we went through New York City's Rat Academy twice, trust me. It's interesting, we know a lot about rats now, but but what I hear is that our neighbors don't know this stuff,
Okay.
right? So we devoted a lot of time because we're sick of rats in our garden, and we wanna do something about it. And we got our neighbors all fired up about it, but, that's a couple blocks worth, that's not everybody, so. But if this information got to people, I think it would be much more helpful to them, and then so if we don't know how long this is gonna take to find out if we can get a contractor, then they have to do the survey, then they, so that all takes time. We're already way past the summer, and the summer is when they're really active, right?
Well,
You're
that's 'cause all
talking,
the barbecues.
you're
and
talking
everything.
about it getting warm,
Exactly.
and this is when they come alive, so. The other thing, the only suggestion that we were thinking of that we could put in place immediately are these alley cleanups that we've been doing. If there's a way that we can tag team that with, like, people do block party, they have to get a permit to do a block
Right,
party.
and that's what I wanted to bring up. So Vaughn Kirshner gave us a flyer,
Okay.
and we were going to give that to people who applied for block parties and ask them, when they go to get signatures on a petition, to also pass this out. But this is much better than
Okay.
waste management. So if you
But
have,
this and this, because this is what you do, this
I'm
is
gonna-
how to report.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you though, this
The other one, right?
right here
This one, yeah.
is gonna be a waste of time, because I'm gonna tell you something. Residents, and you're trying to educate them, the reason why Claudia designs
The other one.
flyers like that
Yeah.
is because there's certain things that catch your eye. They're gonna read the top line,
Yeah.
they're not gonna read anything
And
else.
the-
And the other stuff is not really, this is internal.
No, I get you, but I'm just saying, even if I knew, I make a call, I have to leave my number. Something as simple as fill out the thing and leave your number, and you will get a call back. Or, I don't know shit about QR codes, but something's like, oh crap, yeah, I can do that on my phone. If people don't even know it, and they don't, we go and tell people the most basic stuff, and they're like, oh really, I didn't know I could do
It
that.
even says it on the poles in the alley, my phone number is.
Nobody stops to read this sign, it's
But,
beautiful,
but, I
and I
mean,
love
but
it.
it's on all of our flyers also.
Right.
But I definitely think
I
we
mean, I think
can
the education
continue to provide you,
Repetition is all I
you know
can
what,
say.
we'll create like even, we'll go as far as doing a specific one for block parties, where we want people to continue to come together with their residents, but even mentioning things like, for example, waste management, and we would figure out cost and include that information. It sometimes has those pop-up garbage cans. Maybe that's what's needed at block parties, because people, when they wanna clean up, we've had residents, I'm sure you guys have gotten the calls that say, well, I don't know, we had a party, so this is the one situation we're gonna have overflow.
Yeah.
So letting them know with that anticipation in mind, how to contact waste management, how to let them know that there's going to be a party that's gonna take place and they may need additional support. I totally do agree with you, because as much as we're talking about expertise, the education portion of it for residents is key. And again, we don't wanna assume that people know, as common as it may seem, that you need a garbage lid on your garbage can, things like that. So I totally agree with you, and we'll make accommodations to supply.
That's fabulous. And
The
I'm,
clerk.
and I'm working with Rob to, we're working with Rob to put together like a short little, ad hoc video that tells people what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
That's
For
great.
rats,
That's
it's
important.
super simple. We were literally gonna create a PowerPoint because we went to the Radican. And learn so much, you know, and if you can tell people something as simple as, if you see one hole, look for the other one. Look at an 8-foot radius and you might find the other one, plug them up, and then you'll get rid of the, and we just learned that if you, you can get dry ice for practically nothing, and that's what really kills them. You throw it in the hole, plug up both ends, and they die because of the carbon monoxide that it creates. It's pretty humane, they just fall asleep and die. And
It's not very effective.
well, you
So
have
you have to research it, because it is not very effective.
you have to plug all the holes.
So
And
like
that's
community
hard to do.
tips, best practices?
Even the simplest, make it inhospitable, you just don't want them around. We're putting a whole bed of rocks around our garage so they can't burn
One
a
of the
window.
things too, you need to let the residents know, you can order another garbage can. That doesn't mean you're gonna get billed extra for having your garbage removed. So this way you're generating the garbage, you've got somewhere to put it and you can cover it instead of leaving open cans overnight.
Well, here's the other
Yeah,
thing
we
too.
do that in court, when we have people, especially repeatedly, you know, they have to order another can.
Now, we asked Vaughn Kirschner at a previous meeting that we had here a few months ago. And I asked the question to him, and he said he would get back to the city, I don't know if he did. I asked him how many cans are needed to accommodate the residents. So in other words, let's take Atrium Court, okay? So now you have roll-ups and not regular,
Well, wait, now you're talking.
well, both.
Yeah, but you're not talking Von when you talk there, because that's private. I thought
Right.
you were speaking of
No, but
our
Both.
cans.
Well, no,
But you're
both.
talking about
The city,
dumpsters.
in the city.
But Waste Management also services.
Right.
They
Well, they have
also
different,
provide those.
well, they
Yeah,
have
and
different
Vaughn
companies.
had like a specific arithmetic that he could do.
Right,
In
and he
order,
said he would get
if you
back
have
with
this
us
many
with that.
units, you should have this many.
Exactly.
Oh, gotcha.
So he was gonna provide
Right,
that.
so I don't know if he got back to us with that, but like, to give you an example, Atrium Court for years had 3 roll-ups. They have a pickup on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
I don't see it over there.
They, Bobby made a call and they got him to get another roll-up, now they have 4. Last Sunday, every lid was up, the garbage was overflowing, and I saw rats running around on top of the cans. So you have 60 units in that building, is 4 enough? Obviously it isn't. So how, that's what I asked the question to Vaughn, how many roll-ups do you need? So let's just use the number of 10.
You would think that they would
Yeah.
have that information, because when
He
an
didn't
apartment
have-
building or whatever is ordering,
Well, he
you
didn't
would
have it
think
with
that they
him.
would
Right.
have some
He
kind of
was gonna
calculation
He
to
said he
tell
would
them
provide
this is
it.
what you would need.
But he said he would get back to the city with that information.
But I think to your point though, Don, that's something we as a committee have been wanting to look into, to
Yeah.
see like how can we either, enforce that a little bit more if we do set a number, right? Or is that?
Yeah, we do it, we
ordinance, or is
enforce
that-
it in court.
Yeah.
We enforce it in court, and a lot of times if they don't, you're welcome.
Thank you for taking time. Please have some
Um,
coffee.
We do enforce it in court. A lot of times, there's not room for another dumpster, and if that's the case, then you know what, if you have to get a pickup every day, then that's.
Whatever works.
That's what you're gonna have to.
Whatever works.
But are there
because-
current numbers on the books right now that we have set? Like, do we have like a,
Ordinance or something?
yeah, an ordinance around like how many you're supposed to have based on the size? I think that's what you're asking for, right? Like,
No,
is it-
I don't
Example
think,
four,
I don't
yeah.
think so, because that wouldn't, that's not our expertise, it's
Right.
more the company that they're ordering from. They should know what they need. But like I said, when you have problematic places,
Right.
you have people that are moving out, you have,
Right.
you know, different, and then, of course, you always have, when you have a dumpster, you're always gonna have fly dumps,
Mhm.
always.
Right, no. But now Atrium Court does have a completely enclosed, a fenced-in area.
Yeah,
With a gate, you know.
sometimes the fence is closed, sometimes it isn't.
Sometimes it is, right, okay, but what I'm saying is that Waste Management should be able to provide us with a number, how many roll-ups necessary to service a 60-unit
Yeah,
building.
that's up to waste management, I wouldn't,
But I mean, if we don't have that in place, we're gonna have overflowing garbage, and I was explaining to Rob, we're chasing these rats to be futile if we can't get the garbage under control. Because it's like an open buffet all the time at Atrium Court.
Well, I'm gonna be very interested in the numbers, like I had told
Yeah.
Rob. I did from 2018 to 22, our last meeting, I ran the numbers from January to April, and I was very happy to see that April was less this year. So hopefully we're trying to get out of this pandemic situation, because of the fact everyone knows when the restaurants were closed, there was no food source, so they went to the residents.
Right.
The residents had their kids home, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Their garbage was overflowing more than normal. So I think we just need to get over this hump, and then we can, the numbers will be more readable to a consultant, and you know, anything else that we need to put into play.
Okay. So I wanted, Joe Carmichael couldn't make it today, but he did ask a few questions, and you all have answered some of them through the conversation today, but I did just want to make sure that I threw them out there. One of the question was around what amount of the budget is dedicated to rat abatement. So I guess like how much are we spending right now?
It's all rat abatement, right? It's all rat
I'm
abatement.
not aware of it.
What is the total amount that we spend on rat abatement? How much is that? Do we know?
I received a communication from Chuck Lazara, who said that we paid Awesome Pest $35,000 last year for rodent abatement. I can tell you that the intergovernmental agreement that the health district has with the city states that we only pay $6,000 toward that bill, and so we asked for that bill and paid it recently. The health district did increase the budget for rat abatement from $6,000 to $20,000, just in anticipation of increased costs incurred by the city. But to my knowledge, David hasn't been approached about updating our intergovernmental agreement about that $6,000 cost.
Okay. Thank you for that. Another question was, how many staff are working on rat abatement? I know we talked about staff earlier, there was talk about that. Currently, right now, how many people do you all have working? And I know it's hybrid, because I know some folks are doing other things too. I know you're getting support from different departments, so that might be tricky, but.
Are you just specifically saying abatement? Because then it's none.
Or just
abatement.
Just, I guess, the process, right? So how many people are working on this right now, whether it's like intake or maybe
So
going to
We
the
have
sites?
the whole blight department works on it
Okay.
in some capacity.
Okay,
And we just took on a cost of bringing Josie on and doing some work that
As
was
a commercial pest control inspector.
not being done.
okay. And did you all feel like this is, and I know I just have to ask the question, I have to make sure this is explicit, but do you all feel like this is sufficient in terms of staffing? Like, are there gaps that you see where you can get some more support?
Well, I mean, the only gap we have is we can't afford to hire a consultant. We can't afford to go to a different pest control because with our budget, Claudia has been working
Right.
for God knows how long, probably over a year now, trying to talk to different companies, and when they hear our budget, from what I understand, they just.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, no other city, functions in the way that we do, where rodent abatement is a building. It's usually health district.
Right, okay.
So if you're saying like, do we have enough staff? We don't have a department that should exist, so that's a gap. Because the other cities, when you contact them, they have a department of rodent abatement, separate from building, separate from blight, even separate from health
Yeah,
district.
Cicero has that same thing, they have a
Exactly.
separate
So,
department.
so what I'm saying is like, what are we missing? We're missing a rodent abatement department in its entirety. Because we have, you know, the blight officers doing reporting, but no one but Joe, our contractor, does abatement.
Right, but our inspectors, our blight inspectors, are they knowledgeable to spot, you know, burrows or whatever, I mean, they
No.
could tell Joe?
No, they don't
No.
have that knowledge, no.
No.
I would
And they
wonder-
shouldn't have that knowledge. I mean, that's something completely different
Yes, it
from
would be
their job
considered
description.
Well, that's true,
Yeah.
but when they go
I
out to
mean, when
look
you
for
see,
them.
when you see a hole, I mean, if they would see
Yeah.
something that doesn't look right,
Look
they would
right.
probably,
Yeah.
but that's not
Environmental
their.
blight. That's what they
environmental,
look
I'm
for.
just wondering if that could,
That's not their expertise.
that's not their expertise, but if they could be educated in,
Well, that's what
Spotting
Joe,
that.
but that's what Joe is for, and
Yeah.
Joe controls the whole city, and he also, when he goes out and puts these signs, he goes back to the areas and
course.
he checks and he'll
Right.
put the date. So he goes through the alleys, that's what he's specifically looking for.
okay.
But I mean, the inspectors do things like if they
They
see
pick up dead rats all the
droppings,
time.
you know, or
Yeah,
if
if they see the droppings,
yeah,
yeah.
if they see, sightings that
Sure.
probably all of us
Sure.
recognize, of course they'll report, but there are many other aspects of abatements that, you know, we just recently became aware of, that we know there's no way that, you know, our inspectors have the capacity or even the time, because they kinda have to assess, move on, and a contractor would more have to, create a plan for that area. So our inspectors are going, saying, there's overgrowth here, there's garbage here, there's a missing lid here, period. And a contractor would say, there's all these 3 things, this is what needs to happen, they bring in different departments. I've essentially been doing that, job, but that's a whole job on its own.
Right. And I was just wondering,
Yeah.
you know, I know what you're saying, but
Yes,
if our inspectors, when they go out and see that there's overgrowth or whatever, and they see
Yes.
droppings, hey, Joe, there could be a problem at,
well,
Well,
they
sure they
Sorry,
do, they work
yes.
together.
Yes.
You
They
know,
work
that
together,
way
but
would
I'm gonna
help,
tell you
you
something,
know.
we have 3 blight officers for the whole city,
for the whole city.
and they are
Three
taxi.
plans where-
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes.
with other stuff that you guys probably have no idea what they do.
Yeah.
I
You know.
I can imagine.
So the last thing I want them to do is go out and look for, you know, a
No.
burrow when they don't, you know, when you see a hole, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a rat.
Right.
In the years, I can't tell you how many reports to the city that complained about rats and they were possums and they were squirrels and, you know, and those reports came from Joe saying, no, this is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I would say it's adding a burdensome task to the blight inspectors, because they essentially are keeping an eye for that, but then there's other things like, you know, abandoned houses and
Right.
many other aspects of blight. And so every single time a report comes in, sometimes a person could say, there's a rat, there's not a rat there anymore.
Yeah.
2 days later, the inspector still has to go populate a report, create an assessment, send it to Mary. We're talking about anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes for essentially nothing. And that happens on a daily basis on top of their daily tasks.
So at the health district, we have 3 people that kind of sort of do health inspections in commercial restaurants, daycare centers and other businesses.
Mhm.
And so we have one who is, everybody has to multitask over at the health district because of the vaccination and testing that had been going on. But we had one person who was dedicated as the inspector, but again, she did not have the qualifications for restaurant inspections. And so basically what we would do would be go out and make sure that the food service provided by the restaurants was in accordance with Cook County Public Health requirements, you know, temperature, taking the temperature of the food, making sure that the interior of the food prep areas was clean. They were not, if they saw droppings from rats or mice, you know, they would report that and then have our, we employ a licensed health inspector who works for us part-time because you have to have education and credentials from the state of Illinois, and there aren't that many, and he is he works for Lions predominantly, and so really it was just to make sure that food was safe for consumption. We do daycare centers, schools, all the restaurants.
Well, that brings another question, and that's a good point on the restaurants, like, who does check up on all our restaurants within the city that have grease containers, where they dump their grease from their cooking fryers or
Yeah,
whatever?
jurisdiction,
Now, is that
like for the health
is that Berwyn
department.
Health, or would that be the city?
No.
No,
They, you know, if there was something that was grossly awful
Yeah.
about the grease underneath, but they wouldn't go to the exterior of the buildings to check to see whether or not those
Outside,
were
I'm talking
being
where they
cleaned
dump
up.
it outside.
light
in the
rates for
alley.
that.
Pardon?
The blight department writes for that.
They look for that.
Mhm.
The last question, that Alderman Carmichael had was around, the process, the reporting, and so, would you be able to talk a little bit about follow-up? When someone does report something, how are they followed up with, like, what does that look like, after they reach out?
Reporting what? Reporting the,
For the rat, maybe sightings or issues with burrows or something.
well, the
like that.
follow-up is with Joe. I mean,
Okay.
he has his own, and I have no idea how he tracks it or, you know, exactly what he does, but if he has an area that has a problem, he follows up. We have him, do the signs, and that's our way of knowing that he went back. But he also has his own, method of following up with certain areas.
So if like somebody reports like, hey, I've been seeing this in my backyard or next door, and then they keep seeing it, and they're like, hey, I've seen them again, it's keep happening.
Yeah, like if I get a second or a third
Okay,
call
okay.
and I'll ask that person, did Joe give you a call or whatever? I mean, the only thing that they can do, I mean, you know, is if they have reported, Joe puts the signs up saying that he was there.
Okay.
Right.
If I get 2 or 3 calls from the same, you know, address or same area, I'll call Joe, hey, what's going on over there? I got more calls. And I'll let them know that I've told him, but that's all that we can do. We can't call every resident and tell them, hey, they were out there and this is what they
Right,
found.
right.
But if somebody does call me, because of the fact that Joe lets us know his action and it goes into the system, I could say, hey, he was out there on the 12th, but you know what, I'll have him go back out again.
Okay.
You know, we have a lot of calls too that people will say they're seeing dead rats. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't like to say this, but if you see a dead rat, that's a good thing, because.
The poison's working, the poison.
Yeah,
Not when
But
you back up
essentially,
your car and find it in the
every,
garage.
every call does generate a case file. So even if there's nothing found, or like you said, it continues to be an issue, and we have 12:30 reporting every day, there will be a case file
Yeah.
that stipulates every interaction taken in. But again, a lot of the times these could be reported, but if the mitigation factors surrounding that issue, you know, are not addressed, it's a block where there's a lot of people and a lot of, there's not,
There's so many
the
factors.
reality is that it's not gonna be effective. You
Right.
could bait, but if no environmental or human factors change or shift, you're still gonna have the same issue.
Let me just also acquaint you with this fact. So the health district has a certain budget, and I'll be happy to provide copies of that budget to you. One of the problems that I foresee is that the health district is limited in the amount that we can raise taxes by. We're like the school district. We're not home rule, and so we can't take on the huge problem of rat abatement because we can't raise taxes high enough each year in order to implement the program. So it'll be really interesting. We have really spent down a lot of our reserves by keeping our tax requests lower because we had sufficient reserves in the bank, but we spent a lot of money because we decided that we were not going to charge for flu shots, trying to prevent the twindemic. We weren't going to charge. We can't collect insurance, and so we don't charge for PCR testing or vaccinations or any other services that we are putting out. And so one of the things interesting would be, would we be able to even fund a program? Would we have the capacity to pay for, the staff required in order to implement taking on abatement of and follow through of even half the city? And that's something that'll be interesting when we do get replies to the request for proposal. How much is that gonna cost, and is it even feasible for an inadequate health district, uncertified health district, to take on that responsibility? So
Thank you for
Do
sharing
you
that.
have a date though, of when that would, because
I asked
Okay.
for that because, again, we pass things and they fall into some black hole.
Just because there's no date, so there's no time frame.
I'm supposed to receive the RFPs, and then open the bids, or
Yeah.
open them,
Yeah,
and there's been no date given to me of,
there's a bid, you're not gonna be opening it.
so I've asked for a lot of follow-up, for our next meeting.
Okay.
Is there any way I can get some follow-up on this house next door to me? On what's going on?
Yeah, earlier, I think, I don't know if you heard Rob, I will get back to him.
Okay.
So she'll get back to me on what the status is and like what we're able to do. And then, if
Was it-
there's,
Was that the house where the drug guys were?
yeah,
1239 original.
yeah, so I'll reach out to you to let you know what, the city's thinking, and then if we have to move even further, to do something more
Drastic.
extreme or drastic, then we can use Marge's, strategy if we
Yeah,
feel like
that's a
that's
good
the
tool.
appropriate tool, because, first wanna check in if we can get in contact with folks and maybe even just put pressure to let them know, hey, this is a problem, and if we can't do that, we'll have to use this strategy.
And then just a quick, for follow-ups, I just wanna make sure, a lot of the times you'll have somebody tell you that it's been addressed or being looked at, that there's also, guidelines, we can't, when it's private property, sometimes
Right.
folks will come and say, well, who's living there, and we're not going to provide that
Right, right.
information, you're just going to know if it's been addressed, or if it's seeking a solution, but I just wanted to be clear, cause a lot of times I know folks really wanna know, and they're like, well, we wanna see the tickets, and there's certain information that we would give you that same
Well,
respect.
my other neighbor would have been here today, but she couldn't get off of work. She's the one that lives on the south side that has the two flat.
Okay.
And she's just as worried as I am about that property because for over 20 years, he's totally let it go. And, it's never really been addressed. And
Yes.
I also wonder structurally if it's any good inside too, because if you've seen the outside of this property, it's absolutely horrible.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be in communication then, thank you, Mary.
Marge, I wanted to let you know, as far as that flyer, that's for the residents. We did make one for for all the businesses. So like if the blight officer went out and saw garbage in the back or whatever, they were going into the businesses, talking to them and giving them the rodent tip flyer that we have, so I'll make copies for you.
Oh,
for that.
that'd be great.
Awesome, so I just wanted to thank everybody for coming today. I know we had some folks that had to leave early, but I really appreciate all the information you all have shared and the discussion that we've had and the questions that we brought to the table. Also want to thank you for coming and sharing and giving a public comment. I think for us, the next steps are going to be putting together recommendations as a committee, so I think that whole next meeting will be focused on that. Because I think that we have talked to a lot of the stakeholders involved throughout this process and really learned a lot about how we could set up a plan that maybe scaffolds year 1, year 2, year 3 to build towards something that we need as a city moving forward. And so, just welcome you all to join us for that as well, but probably try to schedule that in the next 2 weeks, just so that we could discuss all the findings and the data that we've found, the research that's been done, to put together something that can potentially guide the city moving forward. And would, just want to say thank you, Marge, for speaking to the health district side of this too, because I think that's a really important part of this. And also continue to encourage folks who are involved in this conversation to be at the table, because I do feel like there's a lot of things happening in silos, and we have a space to talk about this, and we have a space to actually figure this out. This is the point of the Rat Abatement Committee. So continue to hold that space and invite people into that space so that we can talk through some of these challenges and barriers and come up with a plan. So with that being said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you.
I guess I'm the only one. I'll make the second.
We still have quorum.
The only thing I would do
Sure.
on this, I would highlight this about the garbage can.
Okay.
So that would be like the quick thing that comes to their eyes.
Please, take some
Keep garbage
trees.
containers, okay. And now, are you on social media as well?
No,
Okay.
none
Just wondering.
whatsoever.
Okay, we can make different ones. I give you, my card for feedback.
Okay.
So-
I don't know.
Chuck had a situation.
Well, you've
that's
been
been
calling it,
years.
haven't you?
That's probably why
I
he
can
wasn't
talk
From what I
here.
understand.
We've seen
Yeah.
the perm, so.
Yeah.
It might be good to have their internal harbor.
Yeah, from what I understand.